Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Well, welcome to the Ghana Mini School. We are going to have a couple of hours on a discussion on the Ocean Decade, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And this discussion is intended to focus on how we organize ourselves on activities and actions to bring all of us into the decade, specifically with a focus on Africa. And we have a panel today that is, we're going to introduce each other. I'm just here to organize things, so just I will disappear as presentations start. My name is Frank Miller Carter. I'm at the University of South Florida, and I work with Brian Arbic, and I'm also part of something called the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, and I'm happy to be of help in this process. So today, I'm going to go through the round of presentations before we start the actual panel, just to allow people to get in. People are still arriving into the session. But let's start with, I'm going to go down the list of the presentations, but Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan in the United States, and we've been running a summer school in Ghana since 2015. Edem Ma, who also is in the panel, is one of the key co-organizers of that. And this panel is part of that school.
Thank you, Brian. Alison?
Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year. My name is Alison Clausen, and I'm a program specialist with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and we're the UN agency that is coordinating the implementation of the Ocean Decade.
Thank you, Alison. Susan?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Suzanne Khalif. I am member of Executive Planning Group of UN Decade of Ocean Science and ex-president of National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries Egypt.
Thank you, Susan, and it really is a pleasure and an honor to have you on this panel. Jacqueline?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Uku. I am a scientist at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute in Mombasa, Kenya. And also I'm president of the Association for Marine Scientists known as WIOMSA that serves the WIO region. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Edem?
Hi, hi everybody. My name is Edem Mabu. I'm a co-organizer of the Ghana Summer School in the Coastal Ocean Environment. I'm with the Department of Marine and Fisheries Sciences of the University of Ghana. I'm also a trustee of the Partnership for Global Observation of the Oceans. I'm happy to be on the panel this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Edem. Edem, also, I'm going to make just as a parenthesis, you were involved with a group of career ocean professionals that is tied with a decade. So it's an important process that we're trying to have a process that is very inclusive of people from different regions, but also different ages, genders, and early career in different career stages. So that's something that people should have very much in mind. Ngozi?
Hello, my name is Ngozi Ogugwa. I'm a researcher with Nigeria Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research in Lagos, Nigeria. And I've been involved in the summer school for the past 3 years. I'm very highly interested in capacity building of African oceanographers. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anthony?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Akwan. I work with the Pan-African Vision for the Environment, an NGO based in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm also a member of the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Forum Work Party Citizen Engagement. I'm particularly interested in promoting ocean literacy in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm going to now start the session formally. We have a presentation by Brian Arbic, welcoming everybody. Then we have Allison, who is going to give an overview of the Ocean Decade and the implementation plan. And then we go into a panel with Susan, Jacqueline, Eden, Ngozi, and Anthony. And then we have a discussion period. In the meantime, I will ask the panelists that are not speaking to mute their microphones so that we don't have an echo. Right now we have a little bit of an echo. And I'm going to make Brian the presenter.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, if you can put it in presentation mode.
Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So Happy New Year, everyone. And thanks for coming, and thanks to the panelists for showing up, and also to Frank for organizing the panel. So welcome to the January 2021 mini school of the Coastal Ocean Environment Summer School in Ghana, COSING. Our website is here. Normally, of course, we hold this school in person. We've been doing it for 1 week in August, every year since 2015 in the beautiful country of Ghana. And so this panel on the UN Decade is the first of 4 panels in the January 2021 mini school. The others are listed here, and I've already sent information on those for you to read about. In this welcome, I'd like to offer a brief history of the school and the purpose and our vision for the future, and a little bit about how it could mesh with UN Decade goals. So a history for me actually goes back 30 years. There's a US government organization called the Peace Corps that sends Americans abroad, and that includes me. I was in northern Ghana and taught secondary school math and physics there 30 years ago. Here's me surrounded by many of my students. I lost touch with them for 16 years, then got back in touch with them, especially the 3 people with the arrows. And one of them, Joseph Ansong, worked in my lab as a postdoc until going back to Ghana as a faculty member. And while he was in my lab, we started the school. And again, it's 1 week every August since 2015. The first one was pretty small, and we only did lectures. Ever since then, it's been bigger. We've had about 100 African participants per year, and about 15 or more people from the US and Europe. With all those extra people, we held more things than just lectures. We did field trips and lab exercises. Then we added boat trips and instrument deployments. And then we added research exercises. This is actually Ngozi, who's a panel member. And in 2019, we had more of these research projects where people presented their results. It was the first time they'd ever given such presentations. Now in 2020, because of COVID, we had to go virtual, of course. And so we have lots of pictures like this of our panels, like the ones that we're having this week. And so what's the purpose of the whole thing? I think it's pretty obvious, but oceanography is a global science, and we need African partners to observe and model the oceans around Africa. Solutions to plastic pollution, climate change, and other global problems will require African participation. So part of what I'm trying to say here is oceanography in Africa is not just good for Africans, but it's good for the whole world because the ocean is global. And I would like to see increased participation by Africans in what you might call the global oceanography enterprise. We've been saying this since our school began, but when you go to big oceanography conferences, there's a growing number of Africans there, but it's still pretty small. It should be much more than that, considering, you know, Africa's place in the global population is something like 15%. There should be many Africans in decision-making bodies and publishing in scientific journals. So our vision for the future, we'd like to keep this school going, of course, and we would also like to expand the idea so that there's a network of oceanography schools like this one around the world. So just a few more slides. One idea we're putting out is called the Ocean Corps, And it's based on that Peace Corps that I talked about that sent Americans abroad. Many scientists want to join our summer school, especially young scientists, but instead of having hundreds of scientists going to Ghana and working with Ghanaians, why not have similar schools around the world? Depends how ambitious you want to be, 10, 50. We know that scientists in other African countries want to host similar schools. There's a lot of interest. What's missing is funding, and we propose an Ocean Corps as a unifying concept to get people excited to work together and obtain funding. And speaking of funding, we're also proposing an EQUISEA fund, which would be a global fund for any kind of capacity building projects around the world, not just the summer schools that are a favorite of mine, but these other things, private sector opportunities, buying equipment, travel, degree programs, and lots of other things. There should be more funding for oceanography. My last slide, as you're going to learn, today's panel is about the UN Decade for Sustainable Development of Ocean Science. Africa is going to be a major focus. We hope that many Africans will participate, and I've just given you a couple of my favorite ideas stemming from the school, but we'd like to hear what everyone else's ideas are. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Alison Clausen is going to talk to us about the implementation process for the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, what we all call the Ocean Decade. Now, the process that she's going to describe is leading to actions. And so these actions, many of us are involved in writing proposals for actions. And it will be interesting later to discuss who is developing some, how can we work together. So this is something that she's going to describe. So Alison, do you want to share your presentation? Let me make you presenter.
Yeah, if you could make me presenter, and I will aim to get the technology right. It's the first day back in the office today, so a little bit slow getting started. How's that looking? Let me put it into presentation mode.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, how's that? That should be in presentation mode now.
Yes, it is in presentation. Good.
Fantastic. All right, look, I've got about 15 minutes worth of slides. I will try to go through them relatively quickly to leave time for questions so that I can make sure that I'm really responding to what is the most interesting for you. But what I want to do here today is really give you some of the sort of the nuts and bolts of how the decade is going to work and how you can get engaged. And I have to say that this event today, as far as I know it, is the first event in the Ocean Decade. The Ocean Decade started 3 days ago on the 1st of January. So as far as I know, this is the first event where we're talking about the Ocean Decade when the decade has actually started. So it's a really exciting event and a great thing to be a part of. So I want to, before I get into the nuts and bolts, perhaps just remind you, some of you have been involved in this, but for others that have not been involved, give you an idea of the process so far, how we got to where we are now with this 10 years ahead of us for the decade. Over the last 3 years, we've had a very participatory process, I would say, to really make sure that stakeholders and ocean actors around the world have had a chance to have their say in what the priorities should be for ocean science over the next 10 years. So we've had a global planning meeting in 2019. We had 11 regional planning workshops, including one in Nairobi around this time last year or late January last year. And overall, those workshops convened around close to 2,000 attendees, which were both scientists as well as early career ocean professionals, NGOs, governments, private sector funders, a whole range of different actors within the ocean space. We've created different working groups to look at particular themes, and Frank mentioned the early career ocean professionals. There is an informal working group that has been established. There are groups around ocean literacy, around data management. Of course, we have our executive planning group, of which Dr. Susan Koliff is a member. which is overseeing and providing strategic advice on this project. And all these discussions and groups have led to the development of the implementation plan for the Ocean Decade. And I'll put the link to the plan in the chat box when I've finished talking. But this implementation plan is really the framework for what's going to happen over the next 10 years. That plan has been through extensive peer review by the scientific community, as well as member states, as well as UN agencies. And on the 31st of December, so just last week, it was formally adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. So it is now the official plan for the Ocean Decade, which is going to be our framework moving forward. So this implementation plan, what's in it? Well, first of all, I think it's really important to remember that it is not a prescriptive document. There's no way we can sit here and say, this is exactly what is going to happen over the next 10 years. The implementation is a strategic framework, and it is a dynamic and living document that will evolve over the life of the decade as issues are resolved, as new issues come up, as new partners come on board. The implementation plan sets out a vision and a mission for the decade, which fairly standard stuff for an implementation plan. But I do want to spend a little bit of time looking at these. The vision of the Ocean Decade is the science we need for the ocean we want. Now, the important thing, one of the important things around this vision statement is when we talk about ocean science in the context of the decade, we're talking about a very broad definition of ocean science. So yes, we're talking about the research, but we're also talking about the capacity development. We're talking about the technology, the data, the ocean literacy. We're talking about all the different scientific disciplines, so economic science, political science, social science, and we're talking about the way that we use that science as well, so the science policy interface or the use of science for innovation and technology. So it's very important to keep in mind this very broad definition of science. And then we have the mission of the Ocean Decade. So transformative ocean science, solutions for sustainable development that connect people in our ocean. So we're not thinking about business as usual. We're talking about ocean science in a very broad definition that is transformative, that is focused on solutions, that is linked to sustainable development, and in which it really looks at ways that we can incite people either at an individual level or at an institutional level to change their relationship and change their behavior with the ocean. The implementation plan then sets out a framework for the decade. And if you don't remember anything else from the presentation, it's really this figure that you really want to keep in mind, because this aims in one slide to sort of set out the key structure for the decade. So we're going to start at the bottom here with these decade actions. As I said, the implementation plan is not prescriptive. It does not try and say exactly what initiatives or projects are going to be undertaken. Those things are going to be designed by a vast range of stakeholders, including yourselves, over the next 10 years. And these will be in the form of what we call decade actions. So decade actions can be huge global research programs. They can be national projects. They can be very local scale workshops or training sessions. They can be a whole spectrum of things. And I'll come back to how we're going to identify those decade actions. The decade actions need to be organized in some way so that they're contributing to a collective effort and meeting a collective objective. So we have different decade objectives, which really represent the steps in the process as we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want. So this is about identifying the knowledge we need, about generating the knowledge we need, and about using the knowledge we need. The decade actions also need to respond to what we're calling the Ocean Decade Challenges. And these are 10 of the most immediate and pressing priorities for the decade. And I've got a slide on those. So I will come to those because they're really, really important, because they really set out the priority areas where actors are going to work throughout the Ocean Decade. And then all of this work, all of these actions that fit into the objectives and that fit into the challenges will fulfill decade outcomes and then help fill the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as regional and global policy frameworks. So let's go straight to the challenges. What are these 10 Ocean Decade challenges that we're trying to resolve or trying to fulfill during the decade? Well, you can see them on the screen in front of you. before I go through them, I think, again, it's really important to remember that these are the current challenges for the decade, and they will evolve over time. Hopefully, some of them will get solved and we can take them off the list, and then other ones will be added to the list as issues emerge over the next 10 years. So the first group that you can see in blue are really about knowledge and solutions. They're about knowledge and solutions for pollution, for ecosystem restoration, for sustainable food security, for equitable and sustainable economic development based on the ocean, as well as the ocean climate nexus. The next three that are in green are really about the essential infrastructure that is needed for ocean science. So multi-hazard warning systems, community resilience, ocean observations, digital representation of the ocean, including data. And then the last two in yellow are really foundational or cross-cutting challenges that really underpin all of those above them. So it's about capacity development and equitable access to data, information, knowledge, and technology. And then finally, ways in which we can identify and overcome barriers to behavior change that is really needed to create this step change in our relationship with the ocean. This next slide just gives you another vision then of how all this comes together. So in the red part, you have the ocean we have, and I haven't spent a lot of time talking about the ocean we have because I'm sure many of you on this call know the statistics and know the data, the problems, the threats that exist in the ocean. But we want to move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want. And we want to do that through these decade actions, which are the programs, the projects, the activities, the contributions that you as a community will identify and implement. These actions will feed through the decade objectives into those ocean decade challenges that you can see and that we just talked about, and they will lead to the ocean we want, which is represented in terms of these 7 decade outcomes, which you can see there on the slide, which are a clean ocean, a healthy and resilient ocean, a safe ocean, a productive ocean, an accessible ocean, etc. So the actions, how are we going to identify them? Well, at different levels, they will be identified in different ways. There is currently a call for decade actions, which is out, which is trying to solicit ideas about the highest level of decade action. So these are really the global or major regional programs of work. This current call, and I can answer questions about this if it's something that people want to learn more about, is open until the 15th of January. There are no geographic or thematic restrictions, no limits on who can apply. They do need to, again, be global or major regional programs of work that contribute to the Ocean Decade challenges, as well as fulfilling a set of endorsement criteria that are set out in the implementation plan. Now, this is very much a first call for decade actions to set in place some of the really big building blocks of the decade, and it will be followed by other calls as of the first quarter of this year for other programs or other projects to fit into these large programs of work. Now, it's important, I think, to say the call is not a funding call, but the IOC, which is the UN agency that I work for and which is coordinating the decade, will have a role in trying to matchmake between resource providers and those that are proposing decade actions, including through this call for decade actions. So again, I can put the link in the chat box where you can get more information about this call for decade actions, which is focusing on those global or major regional programs of work. Secondly, another process which has recently been launched is it really at the other end of the spectrum about decade actions, and this is about the local, smaller scale workshops or training sessions or events or activities that you want to undertake throughout the Ocean Decade. And there is a way now to have these officially recognized as part of the Ocean Decade. And so there's a link here. Again, I can put this in the chat box so you can follow it, where you can already start submitting your events, your workshops, your publications, or your conferences to become part of the official movement of the Ocean Decade and contribute to the Ocean Decade challenges. Just before I finish off, there are just a couple of other points I want to touch on, and one of them is stakeholder engagement. As you saw throughout the preparation phase of the Ocean Decade, stakeholder engagement has been extremely important with a very large number of regional planning workshops, a large number more recently, of course, of virtual and online events. This is going to continue, and this stakeholder engagement is going to be essential to the success of the decade. There is a global stakeholder forum which is currently being developed and which will be a virtual and in-person forum to really convene different stakeholder groups throughout the decade to make sure that opportunities are widely advertised, that people are aware of different collaboration opportunities that exist, or funding opportunities that exist, or training opportunities that exist. And we'll be asking different groups if they would like to register as official stakeholder engagement networks as part of the decade. So there will be a process for that registration happening soon, and you can see the website address there. So keep an eye on that, and there will be a way, if you have a group that wants to become officially linked to the Ocean Decade, that you can register through that link and become part of this global stakeholder forum. I do want to say a word about resource mobilisation, because when we talk to different communities, this is obviously one of the things that comes up often, is how is the decade going to help me find funding to carry out my research, or to carry out new projects, or to do this transformative ocean science that we need. I think it's really important to be very clear that the Ocean Decade itself is not a funding mechanism. It's not a pot of money, it's not a foundation, it's not a trust fund, but what it is doing is working both with the ocean science community and ocean actors on one side to develop the actions and to bring people together through co-design processes and collaborative research processes to develop the actions we need for the ocean we want. And on the other hand, it's working with the donors, so the foundations, with the development banks, with private sector, and helping create a very strong alignment between the resources that exist on one hand and the priority actions on the other hand. And I won't go into the full details here, but the implementation plan sets out the different mechanisms that will be really used to make those connections between the proponents of Ocean Decade actions and the resource providers, so that there is a matchmaking and a way in which those connections can be made. As I finish up, just looking at some of the milestones that are coming up. This first slide, or this second to last slide, gives you an overview of some of the milestones coming up over the next 10 years. So you will see that there are various global and regional conferences that are planned throughout the decade. There will be different reports, both annual reports and reports every 3 or 4 years, that will really try and measure the impact and the outcomes of the decade. There will be different ways in which the midterm review process will be used to update and make sure that the implementation plan and different parts of the decade action framework are kept up to date and can evolve and so on. So this is something that there'll be opportunities for those stakeholder engagement networks that are part of the stakeholder forum to become involved in. And so we're really trying to have a process which is very open and that does allow for adaptive management of the decade over the lifetime. And then finally, as my final slide, just to give you some ideas of some of the next steps and key milestones that are coming up in 2021. As I said, the 1st of January, which is now past, the decade starts. The 15th of January is the closing date for that first call for decade action. So very, very soon now. But as I said, it is only the first call. There'll be many other opportunities to have your decade action submitted and endorsed. We'll be having various events throughout January and into March and April to really celebrate the launch of the decade. There will be a high-level opening to the first International Ocean Decade Conference, which was going to be an in-person conference, which is now a virtual conference that will happen in June. There will be the progressive establishment of coordination and governance structures, as well as the stakeholder engagement mechanisms over the year. There will, of course, be the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon later this year that we're still waiting for confirmation of a date on. And then there'll be a series of regional kickoff events, both at least for Africa and Asia, and we hope many other regions. So all these milestones, dates are being confirmed and plans are being put in place. Obviously, everything is very dynamic at the moment, given the different constraints that we're all working under, but the best place to find all this information is on the Ocean Decade website. And we'll certainly be posting information there about events and other things as they come up. So really do keep an eye on that and make sure that you're tuned into our social media as well, so you can get the most up-to-date information on all the different things that will be launched for the Ocean Decade throughout the year. And with that, I will finish up, but thank you very much for your attention and very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Alison. I don't see any questions yet on the chat or in the question box, but everybody that is participating in the session should feel free to post questions to the panelists or to Allison through the chat box. There is unfortunately no way to turn on the voice for everybody, but there's a mechanism to post your questions. So if there are no questions, we can go into the panel at the moment, and then we will have a discussion session at the end where we can go back to you, Allison. So as we start the panel, the idea here is to come up with some vision that each one of you may have for the region, or how we engage in the process that Allison described. We really all want to find a way to establish these actions and get engaged and work together toward that. So Dr. Susan Kolev is part of the group, the executive planning group that developed the concepts for the vision, the implementation plan, working with the IOC. So Susan, I'm going to make you presenter. And
yes, okay.
Just give me a moment.
Okay now?
Yes, perfect.
Frank?
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I wish to thank Frank for kind invitation and for organizing this event. It's a pleasure to be here with you in Aru to share some thought on how Africa best benefit from the decade. Thank you, Alison, so much for your excellent presentation. Africa has a great potentiality, but faces greatest challenge as well. Over this challenge, Africa facing development is threatened the sustainable use of ocean and sea resources, such as marine plastic, biodiversity, climate change, acidification, and overfishing. Overall, the limited access to innovation technology and unequal distribution of capacity building between countries, in addition to weak legal policy and institutional framework. To address this challenge, African countries established, or African Union established many 5 strategies, as you see. This strategy to boosting African development and sustainability. Africa is only continent which has a common vision for its economic integration and socio-economic development. However, in most cases, the society is still suffering, looking for bold and coordinated action. Now, ocean contribution to sustainable development in all continents, while other countries and the region are harvesting the benefits and returns from the blue economy. But in most cases, we can see Africa remain on the sideline, looking on while others take action. Africa is still facing numerous challenges in developing the blue economy agenda, which can be the engine of economic growth. This challenge ranges from financial barriers to limited access of technology. Now, after Alison explained the first call of decade, we can say that we are optimistic, but most of these challenges can be met through UN decade. Our turning point now is the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development that can help to send the Africa along a dynamic paths for sustainable development, focused on transition toward blue economy for advancing African development. Decade implementation plan, as Alison also explained, open transformative possibilities of knowledge and of action to encapsulate all the potentials of ocean resources, to offer a platform and to help to build an excellent platform for African transformation. how and indicate quickly, or this takes the time. How can move from Africa we have to Africa we want through decade. I bold or highlight on only 5 points. We can expanding fisheries, aquaculture, tourism, marine transport, which can help with food security and energy security as well, and solve the problem of employment and enhance economic growth and sustainable use of ocean resources, and also can harness the untapped potential of the oceans and the seas of Africa to improve the life of all population, particularly women, youth, and indigenous people. And we can creating the prerequisite and support the implementation of African economic agenda through supports the blue economy sectors, which can provide food security for and nutrition for more than 200 million Africa. We can leverage the latest through decade, Africa can leverage the technology and latest innovation and scientific advances and best practices, and to build prosperity and to enhance their livelihood while conserving ocean for future generations. My final end also, we need Africa need all actors, government, civil society, private sectors, academia, also all partner or everyone in society to work for Africa. I am confident that the prosperity for Africa comes soon, where I see wind of hope is stronger than ever. Please speak about Africa with one voice. Only Africa, not North, Earth, for not Atlantic, Ocean, or Mediterranean. Only one Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to take a little break here because there are some questions that are coming up on the question panel. And this is relevant to Alison's presentation and to you, Susan, your presentation also, and thank you very much for that. The question is, this comes from Juliet Igbo. She is working on her PhD was on waste. So she wants to know, one, how can she be part of the decade? And the second, how can the region or a specific person like her be involved or benefit from the decade?
May you explain this well, better than me? Do you like to reply?
Yes, Alison or Susan, please.
Yeah, Alison. Yes.
Sure, I can start, and then you can complement Susan. Look, there are many different ways that people can get involved, and some of the principal ones are by becoming part of a group that is going to implement a decade action. So this may be either, again, a relatively local, small-scale activity, whether it be a meeting or a workshop or a training session, or getting involved in a project or a program. And so it's a question of seeing next year, when or later this year, when some of the calls for programs or projects come out, which ones are most relevant to your area of expertise, and then looking at which groups may be putting together projects or programs that you could join and collaborate with to be part of that. So that's one way to get involved. Another way is to look at joining or establishing a stakeholder group that will be part of the decade. So there are certainly regional groups that are starting to emerge, and I think in Africa, at least in Eastern Africa, there are some regional initiatives that are starting to emerge. There are certainly some national decade committees that are starting to be put in place, and we're really encouraging different countries to put national decade committees in place as a way of communicating at the national level. But there are also thematic groups, such as an Early Career Oceans Professional Group, an Underwater Cultural Heritage Group, and you'll be able to progressively find information on all these different groups on the website, and ways that you can get in contact with the organisers of those groups. But But you can also establish your own group. So if you have a particular interest in a particular theme or in a particular geography that you'd like to get a group of people together, then certainly there's that opportunity to create those stakeholder groups and register those as part of the decade. The way in which the decade can help you, it's a really, really good question, and I think there are different ways, and it depends a little bit on the stage you're at in your career, the sector that you're coming from as well. But in a very general sense, it can help you make collaborations, connections, be part of a bigger community, be part of a global effort that is really, because it has the UN label to it and it's a UN-led initiative, it is really something that's going to be very, very visible. So it's a way of increasing your networks, increasing your collaboration, tapping into new training and capacity development opportunities. It's also a way of potentially accessing new funding and new resources for your work, because as I mentioned in my presentation, while the decade is not a grant-making facility, it is certainly has the ambition to identify the different programs and projects that are being proposed and put those in front of funding agencies so that we can make those connections with funding agencies and help people to find new sources of funding. So that's, it's a very general answer, I guess, and it depends on the specific circumstances. But those are some of the ways that we hope the decade will benefit researchers and professionals who want to get engaged.
Sorry, we lost Susan for a moment, so hopefully she can join us again. We will continue with the panel and then come back to some of these questions. Next is Jacqueline. I see that I think Susan's screen is still being shared, but I don't see Susan on the list. But Jacqueline, do you want to go ahead? Do you have a presentation, or do you want to just say a few words? We cannot hear you.
I have a presentation, Frank.
Okay, perfect.
Can give you the right information. Yeah. So let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
Okay, good. I'm very grateful to be part of this panel. As I said, I head the regional association known as WIOMSA, and I'm also a senior researcher and a scientist. And what I do know, having participated in one of the actions for the Ocean Decade, is that it's all about science. And for me, I believe capacity development is the key to sustainable benefits from the decade. And I'll go into just showing how that, what we need to do as Africa. And one of the things I believe we need to do is grow multiple skills across all genders. We need to grow capacity, and not just capacity to develop good science, but also patentable technologies that lead to monetary gain. When I talk about multiple skills, when I grew up, we used the microscope for everything. We could only look through the eye of a microscope to tell what species we were dealing with. But today we have different types of tools, molecular tools. I supervise young researchers that are using eDNA. And I recognize that in as much as we need to use microscopes, we need to move and train in new skills to be able to match the needs of the global transitions and the needs of the decade. We need to keep science and scientists in science, especially women. One thing that I recognize and has happened to me as an African scientist is that the higher you go, the more administrative skills you get. And that becomes especially difficult when you have a demand to balance the science and to do admin. And so it's important to recognize that we need, for us to contribute to the decade and to make an impact in the decade and to be visible as African scientists, we need to keep scientists in science and women in the science. We also need to use international best practices in obtaining data. So, and for that, I'm alluding to the fact that we need to do collect data that is comparable, not data that is uncomparable. So it becomes very difficult to manage to see the trends. It becomes very difficult to be able to say anything about our data. We need to grow our capacity to publish. I am and have been the co-chair of the Global Ocean Science Report 2020. And in 2017, the first report that set the baseline for ocean science, when it came to publications, Africa disappeared from the map. It was very clear that in the publication map, Africa became a dot simply because we have not grown our capacity to publish, and that is very critical for us to engage fully in the decade. And the trends in the 2020 report are still very much the same, that African scientists need to publish and publish in peer-reviewed journals to be able to make an impact. We need to look for innovative ways to publish. In my region, we have publications that provide an opportunity to publish peer-reviewed work, but that can be availed globally. We have the Western Indian Ocean Journal of Marine Science, and we do also produce several publications, for instance, the Regional State of the Coast. And these are things that would help us as scientists remove data from our drawers, from our theses, and pull them out into the public domain to tell the story of our science and its transition. We need training to handle big data sets, analysis of data sets from oceanic cruises. We do have cruises, but often the data sits in the computers and does not have an opportunity to come out and tell the story of trends. As an African scientist, we need to work with multiple stakeholders and learn to fundraise. Alison has just very clearly indicated that we will get support through IOC UNESCO to collaborate and to partner, but we need to recognize that the African scientist is a person who is between the community, private sector, the media, and the policymaker, and we need to develop relevant skills of engagement and to develop responsive research and to fundraise from these stakeholders. And the decade offers us an opportunity to do that. One thing I am very passionate about is looking at our institutions in Africa and creating nodes of expertise on issues and skills and expertise within institutions. And I'll give two examples. I come from an institution that is known as KEMFRI, or Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, and we are known for blue carbon. And so our scientists are contributing to the blue carbon debate worldwide, having started blue carbon work through mangroves in a small village called Gazi. When we were keen in Kenya to undertake seaweed mariculture, we looked across our border to Tanzania because they had developed the expertise and capacity for aquaculture and different aquaculture and mariculture. And so we've used that expertise to grow our own small seaweed farms. We need to develop capacity for long-term monitoring programs where we document historical trends, and capacity for shared equipment, shared inventory in what our institutions can offer. We need also to develop the capacity to speak to the next generation through citizen science programs and ocean literacy. If you walk on on an African village, our children are looking for photo opportunities. They're out on the beach playing. But in the Western world, children are learning how to go to the moon. And that challenges me to begin to understand that we need to train our children early and build that capacity so that they too can either go to the moon or go deep into the ocean. and develop that curiosity, because that capacity has been built. Lastly, I would like to say that we need, as Africans, to give ourselves permission to do these things. We need to push this dialogue, continue it. Perhaps, hopefully, this won't be the last time we're having the dialogue. We need to determine what is important for us. We need to find capacity to cut across our borders and leave no one behind, as Suzanne articulated. We need to come together as Africa, set up working groups to advance capacity building, document baseline information, and track the progress that we make in the decade. Having been part of the Global Ocean Science Report, it was very, very difficult to get baseline information from African nations, simply because we don't document our investment in ocean science. We do not document very much of what we are contributing to ocean science. And so when that is lacking, when we lack strategies that inform our progress towards meeting SDG goals, we find that we have very little to say. Yet back home, we are investing and we are doing things. So I'll just stop there by highlighting the two organizations that I represent and welcome you to look into their websites to see some of the things that we are doing to build capacity of ocean scientists. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That was really good. And I think that the common theme here is that the Ocean Decade is us. It is us who's going to do this and make it real. That was a very clear. So there's several questions that come back to that point on how can we get engaged? And I think it's very clear that it is up to us. Each one of us can get engaged in the way we want it to be most productive. And so that message has to really resonate with participants here. So I'm going to go now to Eden. And Eden, you're welcome to start. Let me see, you have a presentation, right? Yeah, you're muted, I think. Okay, there you go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to serve on the panel this afternoon. My name is Edem Mahu. I am with the Department of Marine and Fishery Sciences of the University of Ghana. This afternoon, I want to share briefly with you what I titled Africa we need to achieve the Ocean Decade. Coming from West Africa, I always compare the story of oceanography in some parts of Africa and the world to the story of attainment of educational vision of a rich and a poor child, of course. So these pictures that we see here are children from Africa, the same continent. They all have one common goal, which is education. But we can see that in trying to attain this goal, one group has more challenges compared to the other. And so you will see that down there, you have school children who are lying on the floor. They do not have the basic infrastructure that can help them achieve that goal, as opposed to their other colleagues who have all the infrastructure that they require to also attain that same vision. a better science to understand the functioning of the ocean must be balanced. My previous colleague has actually mentioned a couple of things that she thinks we can do for the decade. But all this also boils down to, some basic necessities and facilities or infrastructure that as a continent we need to be able to, attain this global vision of having very healthy oceans. I just put these two pictures here to sort of, put things in perspective as far as oceanographic research is concerned in many parts of Africa. We are all trying to, study the same ocean, but we do that with a lot of challenges when it comes to the South, when it comes to Africa. We have so many challenges as far as studying the ocean is concerned. And I believe that if we want to achieve the goal of the decade, then when we are endorsing programs, when we are endorsing activities, we must look out for activities that, sort of strike a balance when it comes to ocean observation, ocean research, science, capacity development, what have you. Africa must not be left behind, as the vision can never be achieved without Africa. And what do I mean by that? Better science to understand the ocean should no longer be something that is of national interest. It must be global. So irrespective of which geographical region, an ocean finds itself, it must be of paramount interest to everyone. It shouldn't be that you have a close link to that ocean, or you are able to tap resources from that ocean basin, and so you just want to develop that part of the ocean, or you just want to make that part of the ocean healthy and sustainable. It will not work that way because the oceans are connected. How do we do this? Funding has been a major issue as far as ocean research is concerned in Africa. I've spoken to a number of colleagues. Our inability to even be represented at conferences, international conferences, is partly to do with capacity. We do not have the capacity. When it even comes to presenting your research, you don't feel so good when you go to a conference, you attend a conference and you see people presenting very sophisticated research, and then you have to present something basic and it looks like what you have is not comparable. We are not saying that we want to get to that level, but what we are trying to say is that there must be a balance, somewhere. And so when it even comes to funding, programs that are being endorsed for the decade should try as much as possible to look for, that balance. Programs that can also support African countries to also be able to do cutting edge research, do good research, come up with ocean best practices. Technology to study and understand the ocean must be affordable and accessible by all. So we have our ocean techs, technological giants, coming out with very advanced and sophisticated methods, for studying the ocean. But I think that if we want to truly, attain the goals that we want for this decade, then we have to pause at some point in time and then ask questions about the technologies that we have so far. Is it accessible? Can everybody, take advantage or use that technology to address the problems that we are all trying to, address globally? We must encourage collaboration. The North-South should work together. The global North and the global South must work together during the decade to ensure that all the things that we have planned to implement in the decade, we are able to do that without that unbalance. Inclusively, we can make the Ocean Decade agenda a reality. If we include everybody, if we do not, leave certain people behind, we can make the agenda a reality. I didn't mention at the beginning of my talk, but I am a co-lead for a program, one of the programs that we are also submitting to the decade for endorsement. And we titled this EPIC, which is the Oceanside Funds for All. And what do we want to achieve with this? As I said, there's no balance in the system. We don't see that inclusiveness. So what this fund is trying to do is to, come out with a global, philanthropic fund that everybody, irrespective of where you find yourself, can go there, look for funding to do research wherever you find yourself. In this fund, we have plans to make sure that we work with technology companies to make sure that we make ocean research or technologies for ocean research affordable and accessible, by all. I'm also part of a group that is also submitting another program that we call Post Predict, which is also a global one. So what do we want to do? We want to be able to predict the coastal oceans globally. And so irrespective of where you are, you should be able to contribute data to understanding of the ocean. And Post Predict and EPIC are sort of also working hand in hand because you need funding to be able to predict the coastal ocean. And so if we want to really achieve the goals that we have outlined for the decade, I think that the key thing is we should look out for programs that, strike a balance, that make sure that Africa is not left behind. We are all moving in the same direction at the same pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. These are some very, very good points. I really appreciate you making them. Again, panelists are willing to accept questions. You can type your questions in the question box, and we will get to you in the period of discussion after the presentation. So next, we are going to hear from Ngozi.
Hello, Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Ngozi Ubua. I'm a researcher with Nigeria Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, Lagos, Nigeria. My contribution to this discussion is what I feel is that the key thing that we need as African researchers is capacity building. We need to build our capacity in all ways. And another thing is that we need to join our efforts as individuals, as organizations, and as countries to bring the ocean, to contribute to the goals of the Ocean Decade. In what way? We have, like in my institute, Nigeria Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, we have a research vessel. We have different departments that deal with different aspects of ocean research. So we can collaborate with other institutions that don't have some of the equipment that we have, and we can conduct a very meaningful research. Like what is going on now is that we have a project now with POGO that early career scientists, African scientists, are in our institute now. They'll be there for the next 2 months, learning how the research work, how oceanographic research, practical research works. So this is something that can be replicated throughout Africa. All the institutes, you come together, will set up networks, strategic networks, like what we are doing now, this summer school. From this summer school, I know that when we had it last year, we had a mentorship, and in my institute, some of us have come together and formed a group that we have people that are going to mentor us on OA. Okay, so these are things that I feel that we as researchers from Africa can do, and we'll be able to bridge that gap between us and the other people from the Western world. We can't always come and start saying that yes, we need the funds, yes, we need research funds, but what do we have? What we have here now, we can get it together and do something. Because let me tell you, we have very brilliant people, researchers working in here. So what we need to do is to reach out. We have the ocean. The oceans are there. We know what we know the locality. People from outside cannot come into our waters and be able to carry out the research we are carrying out freely, because there will be that government barrier. They'll say security. Sometimes they'll say the international researchers can't come here because of security. So we can do the research work, but the challenge there is, after doing the research work, we should be acknowledged. If any publication is coming up from the researchers, we should not be said, okay, with contributions from so researchers from Africa. No, our name should be part of the authors, because we contributed significantly towards the publication. I know why I'm saying this is because there are some researches that a lot of people in Africa have contributed to. At the end of the day, they don't get their names included in the list of the authors, which is a bad thing. So these are the things that we can do: capacity building, forming strategic partnerships. Then we can engage the government, because we know how we can build a capacity to know how to speak the language that the government can understand. So we can now tell them why they need to fund research in the ocean. Why is the ocean important? Why do we need this decade? So this is this is the summary of what I have here. Any questions, I'll go further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ngozi. The point you bring up about participation and publications is really an issue that is global. Africa, you feel it, and you made a very passionate point that people maybe from the north or from developed nations typically have over history. They have gone to many different countries, collect data or collect specimens, and then they take them away or publish on their own without inviting the people from the region. I grew up in Venezuela in South America, and I am very familiar with this problem. Very familiar. It's exactly the same problem. So we need to raise the consciousness that this is not the way to bring the entire world up to, to parity and to equity. I think that this is the change in culture that we need to bring up, and it really takes all of us to engage in a different behavior. This is true. It's happened for young people. It has happened to women. It has happened to people in many different countries. So it's a very, very important point that you make. So last,
Something about that, Frank, too?
sure.
So when we started the summer school, a person who is actually Edam's advisor brought this up. He said that you Westerners, you tend to come and take data, go away, we never hear from you again. And I think one way to solve this problem is sustained interaction, because if you go and you work with people in Africa every year, you go again and again, you develop relationships, and you're a lot less likely to do these, colonial behaviors. So I personally think I agree with everything that was said, and I think sustained interactions is part of the key to solving that problem. That's my personal view.
Thanks, Brian. And next we go to Anthony. Anthony, I'm going to make you presenter.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, we see your screen, and your PowerPoint is in editing mode. If you don't mind putting it into presentation mode, that would be great. Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be part of this panelism, and thanks to Frank and others. Well, I'll be speaking on a proposal for the establishment of the African Ocean Literacy Civil Society Action Network, a key action for the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, 2021 to 2030. The outline of my presentation, I'll briefly give a brief outline of PAVE, the Pan-African Vision for the Environment. Then I'll talk briefly about the goals of the proposal, and then the proposed intervention we are proposing, proposed project activities, and collaborative action we are seeking from partners. Very briefly, the Pan-African Vision for the Environment, which I founded over 15 years ago, is a Lagos-based non-governmental, non-profit, non-political organization established with the aim of promoting sustainable development through networking, capacity development, research, documentation, policy, dialogue, workshop, advocacy, and consultancy services. Very briefly, the goal of the proposal. Writing from Alison's presentation, which I found very interesting, and what we're trying to do, we've discovered that from the title of the proposal, we're trying to promote ocean literacy. We've seen that generally on the continent, awareness about the ocean and how it benefits us and what we get from the ocean is very low, particularly in Africa. And that attributes to the low level of oceanographic activities on the continent, because from the challenges the ocean decade is trying to address, we see that challenge number 10, which talks about ocean literacy, is one of the foundational challenges. And if you have not addressed the foundational challenges, it will be difficult for you to begin to address other knowledge-related challenges. You know, we are still very, very far behind in terms of understanding the importance of the ocean. So we think it is necessary that we address the foundational issues. Then we can begin to build and get everybody on board. Once people begin to understand what the ocean stands for and how it benefits us, particularly here in Africa, then I think resources from government, other stakeholders will readily come. So the proposal we are proposing addresses challenge number 10 of the decade, which says to ensure the multiple values and services of the ocean for human well-being, culture, sustainable development are widely understood and identify and overcome barriers to behavior change required for step change in humanity relationship with the ocean. And secondly, the proposal also is going to address objective number 3, which talks about the increase in ocean knowledge and understanding and develop capacity to contribute to sustainable development solutions. Also, particularly talking about sub-objective 3.1, which clearly states that broadly communicate and promote the role of ocean science for sustainable development across diverse stakeholder groups, including through formal and informal education and an expansion of ocean literacy approaches across stakeholder groups. So basically, bearing that in mind, so what we are proposing, the proposal seeks to address the need for more understanding and awareness of ocean issues in Africa in the context of more stakeholder participation, particularly civil society organization. You know, as a means of broadening the degree of participation, the African Ocean Literacy Civil Society Action Network will be established with the secretariat in Nigeria, chapters in other African countries. We feel by the time we are able to bring civil society together and their capacity is well built and they understand what ocean literacy is, and they can begin to advocate in their various countries, then we'll begin to see a change and a momentum that people begin to participate in ocean and decade activities. Some of the proposed project activities we are proposing, which is not limited to these, ideas are welcome to further broaden ideas in various local contexts or whatever it may be. First of all, we are thinking we want to build a coalition of civil society across all the countries on the continent of Africa. You know, so we need like to set up a secretariat, a documentation center, a resource center, whatever you might call it, for ease of administration and implementation of project activities and sustainability. So another key activity we intend to implement and undertake during the decade period will be to establish ocean education for schools and community programs in Africa. Some of the other panelists touched on this, the need for citizen engagement, citizen education, getting the next generation. So we think this is key activity that needs to be firmly and structurally organized to be introduced to our schools and community during this period of the ocean decade. And also, we're also proposing capacity building and training for various stakeholders, including civil society and other relevant stakeholders that can lead and provide leadership to ensure that materials and services are fully utilized and to foster grassroots participation, their capacity to educate others, including teachers, religious leaders, and on ocean literacy issues. We're also proposing to be able to reach a mass segment of the community, an ocean radio program. You know, so we are looking at producing and broadcasting ocean radio on national radio station in all African countries. We have a collaboration with the World Ocean Observatory in the US, which does these ocean radio program, and we have this collaborative, and we have their endorsement to to be able to broadcast the Ocean Radio program. So what is just needed is for us to be able to get collaborations with radio stations in various countries, or in some that we can't get, pay for airtime, broadcast time, and get this program running. We're also looking at mobilizing youth in various countries to carry out cleanups, carry out cleanup actions in local beaches, streams, rivers, and lagoons in all African countries with youth engagement. Because this will make them to see the practicality and also understand some of the challenges surrounding the ocean beyond classroom activities. So these are also one of the activities we are looking at. Another one is the observance of the World Ocean Days. We are looking at intensifying this during this period of the decade, because even in some countries, you see that they don't want to talk about it, because they are not even aware that there's a World Ocean Day. So once the momentum and the intensity and more people are aware about ocean and what it does to us and what we do to the ocean, then most countries will be able to be observing these days and creating more awareness and momentum for the decade. And the objective also talks about trying to expand action beyond classroom information and find other approaches to break barriers. So we are looking at also using art exhibition. There's this group in the US, Wash Ashore. They have this Art to Save the Sea exhibition, which is, most of the exhibit is basically made from plastic waste from the ocean and all of that. So the different animals, different sea animals, and all of that. And this exhibition will be able to draw people attention. This exhibition can run for as long as you want it to run, maybe 6 months in some countries and all of that. People will come see really and be able to relate directly and understand, oh, plastic pollution is a key ocean issue and all of that, and begin to take key action. These are just some of the actions, and various others could come from various other stakeholders. So our prayers is, if you find this proposal necessary towards achieving the objective of the Ocean Decade, particularly in Africa, we are seeking to sign MOU for collaboration with interested partners, in the design, development, and implementation of the proposal. We're also seeking for the administration of the project. Partners are kindly requested to support. This is something that is directed to the continent, and it has to be fully well structured. So we are looking at a fully furnished, equipped, and staff secretariat, here in Lagos, Nigeria. And every other person has talked about this funding. Funding is key, and Alison also talked about that. So we're also looking to see where we can get collaborations and funding to enable us implement this idea that we have proposed. So I'll stop there, but it is critical that ocean literacy be given a prime priority, particularly on the continent, as it's one of the foundational challenges towards making Africa more vibrant and active in the field of oceanography. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. That was really good to see very concrete possible actions that you would be organizing. I'm certainly interested. I think that the idea of bringing in the art is very important, and engaging the media. I think somebody else also mentioned bringing in the media. So if you're starting an ocean radio, that would be really interesting to see how you do that. How can that be converted, for example, into podcasts, or how we can replicate this in other locations as a collaboration, even between different programs. So There are several questions that people have been posting, and the one question that keeps coming up is how can people get engaged? Is there an if the decade already started, how significant is the January 15th date? So I think people need to feel comfortable that this is not a train that left the station and nobody can get on it anymore. So maybe I want to go back to Allison and Susan to address this and see how, and maybe all of you can provide ideas on how people can get engaged.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Maybe I can start off. The train has definitely not left the station. We have a whole decade in front of us, so things are going to happen slowly. Things are going to happen progressively. They're going to evolve and change over time. So please, nobody should feel that you know, it's too late for anything. The decade literally started 3 days ago. And as you saw from my presentation, many of the mechanisms and the tools are still being developed, where we're still working on getting things in place. So the 15th of January deadline is important for certain groups, and those are really those groups that already have program ideas that are very well developed, that they already want to put into the pipeline for endorsement. But this is just the first of, you know, probably 20 or so calls for programs over the life of the decade. So it's really, we really wanted to have this first call already out there and closing quite soon after the start of the decade to capture those programs that we know are already pretty much ready to go. But I would say those programs that will be submitted are the very, very small tip of the iceberg. There is a whole mass of work and discussions and collaboration that is still going to happen over the next months and years of the decade. And that's exactly how it should be, because things should be developed progressively and submitted progressively. So do not worry about the 15th of January deadline unless you're actively preparing a program that you want to submit. And Anthony, it was great to hear about your program, because we've heard some things about it, but that was the first time I've seen a real presentation. So fantastic to hear more details about that. And then apart from the actual submission of the actions, I think the other thing to keep in mind is to think about joining or establishing a National Decade Committee, joining or establishing a stakeholder group and getting that registered. Thinking about when you're having meetings and workshops, getting that registered as part of the Ocean Decade, as part of the big group of activities and action and momentum that's going to happen. And Frank, I don't think I can post to the whole audience, but I'll send you 2 links in the chat box where people can see some of these committees and see some of these activities and follow those links, which may give them other options to get entry points to the decade.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. I didn't know that you couldn't post to everybody, but yeah, send it to me and I can repost. Okay.
I may add something to Alison comment about the program. The decade starts 3 days or 4 days, and there will be many calls for program and for project. If you go through the Ocean Decade webpage and you download the format of application of the program, you can see it's easy to fill, easy to start the program. Now, at the moment, easy to start, easy because Africa now, as I presented in my presentation, Africa need collaboration, need programs to cover all, to close all gaps. You can, Anthony can explain, can translate your project that in the big program for Africa. Please, my advice to you is that go through oceandecade.org to download the format, the application, and you can easily to. And you need anything, please contact me. Your mail will be at the website. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Susan.
Are there any other comments from any of you?
Frank, may I say something for Adam?
Yes, yes, of course.
Yes, please. Adam, please, I heard for some, there is some unclear idea or point about decade. Decade in vision and mission and aim is for all the world, not only for the Africa or for Mediterranean or for Atlantic or for of Indian, but also if you go through the implementation plan, you can see the objectives and the challenge that the main aim of the decade to help or to support less development countries and small island. That not means that to stay and wait off to get help. Please just start to do something. Start a program, project to fill what you need. And also you said that a decade collaboration between North and the South must become the order of the decade. The collaboration of decades is not especially for decade, for you. You can submit proposal, project, activities, sharing anything to close this gap. You can collaborate. You have to collaborate with North and South and East and North and West Africa. This now is your turn. Decade is ready to hear from you and to receive your idea. And the decade is ready to help. In case of you ask for help officially, as Decade said. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? So there's a question on whether these presentations will be available after this event. I am recording this event, so the recording will be posted through the Ghana Mini School through Brian's Koising website. But I don't know if any of you are willing to share your actual presentations. Please send them to me, and I will post them with Brian.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll do that.
Great.
Okay.
So there some questions are very specific. Many of them are comments that obviously we or Africans need mentorship and collaborative opportunities to do better science. There are many brilliant ideas, but lack of mentorship, leads to some of these ideas to not flourish. And I think that this is kind of at the core of the whole issue. Is how can we mentor each other to engage? How can I, for example, I'm writing a proposal with a whole lot of other people on marine life 2030, and I want to work with Anthony. What are the best ways for us to join in these different program proposals? I know there's several. Adam mentioned the Coast Predict. So there's going to be a number of programs proposed at this stage, January 15th and then later. How and who is going to help us get together?
Maybe I can jump in there again, Frank, because you raise a really interesting point. So the submissions will come in the 15th of January, and we're expecting a large number of submissions for this first round. And again, these are, the very high level program ideas. There will be then a process over a couple of months of really trying to work with the proponents of those different submissions to see where there are synergies, because we don't want duplication. We don't want 10 different programs all addressing the same issue in the same regions. We need to try and find those synergies and really push and facilitate for collaboration. between different groups. And we also have been asking people when they've been submitting, are they still looking for new partners? Are they still looking for others in other geographies or other disciplines that can join this effort? And I would say 100% of what we've seen so far is people are saying, I've got this great idea, but I still want more partners. I still want to see who can join in this and make it even better. So during that process, post 15th of January, we'll be working with different proponents to see how we can create synergies, but also starting to advertise or get information out publicly about the opportunities that may already exist for collaboration. So already through January, February, there will be information coming through the Ocean Decade website about the different programs that are taking shape, about where there may be opportunities for collaboration, about where people are looking for partnerships. And that's all work that the Decade team within the IOC, with the help of the executive planning group, so Susan and her colleagues, are really going to be helping us to carry out over that period, January, February, March. So in some ways, yes, the 15th of January is a deadline, but it's also the start of a process of really opening up and bringing new partners into the fray. So that's one thing for this particular round and for the development of programs. The second point I'd like to make is the importance of this global stakeholder forum. And I went over this fairly quickly, but the global stakeholder forum, which will be rolled out in a very modular fashion, because we're putting it together in a modular fashion, and we need the resources to be able to build it up and roll it out, will be a real central pillar of online architecture for the decade. And so what will happen with what this forum will provide is basically there'll be different communities of practice that will develop around the different challenges. So I went through those 10 challenges. So there'll be different communities of practice around those challenges. There'll also be different geographic communities of practice. So it's sort of like a matrix with the geographies and the challenges. And then different stakeholder groups or individuals will be able to join those communities of practice and find opportunities to exchange and collaborate and participate in training or look at mentoring or look at capacity development opportunities. We're going to have resources, human resources behind that global stakeholder forum to facilitate those discussions, to really curate those communities of practice, so that when people through a stakeholder group or individually want to find out, there's an upcoming call for decade actions, I'd really love to be part of a program on pollution, or I'd like to, understand more about what's happening around ecosystems, it's through that global stakeholder forum mechanism that collaboration and exchange, or those opportunities for collaboration and exchange, will really become visible. Now, as I said, it's a very slow train, the decade. So that stakeholder forum is still being developed now. The architecture is still being put together for that. And so you will see it roll out progressively over this year. But it's going to be a really, really important piece of, or a really important tool to be making those connections, both geographically and then thematically and between different stakeholder groups, so that mentoring and capacity development and peer-to-peer exchange can be happening throughout the decade.
Thank you, Alison. Any other comments?
I'd like to say something briefly about mentoring, if I may. I'd just like to say, I think it's obvious to everyone, but mentoring kind of goes both ways. So one thing I've found is that if you bring, say, Americans, I'm American, to Africa, it really opens their eyes to see a different culture, the different challenges. And so I think we shouldn't just think of mentoring as going one way. It actually goes in both directions.
Yeah, I also think that there are some interesting mentoring models out there, and mentoring doesn't mean that there's a mentor and one person that is also overseen or advised. I think that there is different mentoring models where you can have peers, same age and same or different professions, or you can have people that have been in previous similar situations, like in Adam's case, where you have an early career persons that have been just coming out of that stage and people from completely different disciplines. That, and I think this is part of the decade objective, is bringing people from completely different professions and disciplines together. I think Alison mentioned where you want to bring political science and social sciences together with the natural sciences. And this is not easy. We have talked about doing this since I remember as an oceanographer. We always talk, oh, we are going to mix the social and natural sciences. And then we never really managed to do it. And so getting to these different groups together is not as easy as it sounds. And so we need help with this.
Can I make a comment as well, Frank?
Yes, of course, Jacqueline.
Yeah. One thing we've learned, I think, in our region is making sure that whenever we write projects, we design and inbuild these issues into those projects. So to propel writing, projects will have writing workshops inbuilt into them. We provide grants for book writing as well, where teams come together, and it may be senior, junior scientists, to write books, to write papers, to write publications. So I think what I'm alluding to is the fact that if we want something bad enough, we have to design for it. We really have to push and design and inbuild it into the programs that we are putting into the decade, so that something happens. We've also had this multidisciplinary dialogue, and we've made some steps forward, maybe not enough, but designing for projects that have to include social scientists to make sure that it happens. So I think it's all about the design, and I think as Africans, we really have to look at that keenly as we move into the decade. If we want to come together, I think in this forum we have West Africa, North Africa, the eastern part of Africa, or the WEO region. There's a lot that can happen just from this dialogue in terms of maybe something that could propel us and push us towards one decade output. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jacqueline. In fact, one of the questions that somebody posed is, because people are trying to figure out exactly how to engage, is whether each one of you as a panelist are available to engage in a project that somebody may be developing, or a program that somebody may be developing. Yeah, so I think people should feel free to contact you.
Yes.
Definitely, we are open.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, for example, we had a question, I think unfortunately the person that posed the question left, but it was a very interesting question exactly along the lines that we're talking about. It's somebody that is a lawyer, and the lawyer wants to know how this lawyer is interested in affirmative action in Africa. I don't really know if the language is the same in Africa or in the United States. In the United States, affirmative action has a very specific meaning. And this person would like to know if how the Ocean Decade will deal with laws and the role of lawyers in the Ocean Decade.
It's a really good question. It's a really interesting question. I mean, the Ocean Decade will not create laws, it will not create policy, but it will aim to create the knowledge that will help policymakers and lawmakers make better laws and make better knowledge. And so that also comes back to Jacqueline's point that to do that, you need to have the lawyers in the room with the scientists designing the research questions and designing the projects and the programs together. So I would say the Ocean Decade will aim to reach out to the legal community and make sure they are co-designing the ocean science that is going to take place, and that they have the skills to interpret the knowledge that is being produced, which comes to questions of ocean literacy and capacity development and so forth.
Yeah, Alison, I wonder to what extent the Decade Planning Committee or the Implementation Committee are able to connect the different groups, because I suspect that many proposals that you will receive are purely natural science proposals, and our proposals are going to say that we want to change policy or inform policy and so on. Yet the social sciences are probably less developed in those proposals. Hopefully you will get social science proposals and then you can do the linkage, right? But do you at the moment have social sciences groups that are, or policy groups, obviously the IOC is a policy, has huge policy dimension. So if you have existing groups that we can learn about that can help us connect to, how do we do that? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, look, it's happening. To be very honest, it is slower to engage those groups than it is to engage some of the natural or physical science groups, just because of the history and where we work and so on. But we are starting to get that engagement, and we certainly know of programs that are being developed by social science groups or by political science groups that will be submitted. So again, the details of those programs will be made available as we get through this, as we get through the next few weeks and we start to get an idea of exactly what those programs are. In terms of future connections, again, the Global Stakeholder Forum is going to be really important for that in terms of bringing together these different groups. We will also have the Decade Advisory Board, which will be established next year. So the Executive Planning Group, which Suzanne sits on, was very much a group that was put in place for the preparation phase of the decade, and that will transition and change into a Decade Advisory Board. And within that Decade Advisory Board, there will be representation from social scientists, from political science, from private sector, from funders, so from diverse stakeholder groups. So at that sort of strategic oversight view within that Decade Advisory Board, and then through the Global Stakeholder Forum, there will be fairly good coverage and visibility of some of those, I guess, less typical disciplines that need to be engaged in the decade. But I think you said it, Frank, it's not click your fingers and it happens. It is going to take work, and it is going to take a lot of communication and transparency and honesty and building those relationships. So luckily we have 10 years in which to do this, because it is something that people have been talking about for a long time. And yes, the decade provides a framework for that to happen and some of the mechanisms to make that happen, but it is still going to take willingness and commitment and engagement to use those mechanisms and to make it happen. But I think the first signs you'll get of this are with the programs, with the outline programs that start becoming more visible in January, February, March, where you can see some of those groups that we're already starting to engage with and work with.
Thank you. Anybody else have other comments on this? Anthony, how do you do that? How do you bring the people from the arts and the media together with the people that can do the mentoring?
How do I do what?
Yes. What are your plans? What are you planning to do? So if I wanted to engage as an oceanographer.
No, I didn't get the question correctly. Can you rephrase? You were breaking a little.
Yeah, you are proposing specific actions like ocean radio, and you're proposing to bring the arts into this process. So how, if I have a proposal for a program that I am developing, or how can I work with you so that we can actually get some art and sciences program together and stand them up on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, you know, coming from Alison's presentation about what is your program addressing? You know, what challenges? What are the challenges, and what objectives? You know, and all of that. So once our activities align together, you know, my program can be complementary to what you are proposing, or it can be a subset of what you are proposing. You know, for example, you are proposing a global program, for example, you know, the Marine Health 2030, you know, biodiversity and everything, you know. So you are looking at addressing a couple of the challenges or all of the challenges, depending on who you are bringing in to address what aspect and all of that. Definitely, I'm sure somewhere you will need to talk about ocean literacy and address challenge 10. You know, so in that place, then I can fit in, you know, as doing the advocacy, the ocean literacy background, and to cover that end. So I can be a component of your overall larger program. You know, that's the way I say it. You know, it's not because, you know, the specific challenges, some are highly scientific that really need high level, you know, like the observation and the mapping and all of that. I don't have those capabilities. I don't have those skills to do that. I cannot. So you might have a program that touches on that, and also you also need for people to understand. Okay, why do I need to do this? Then I need to understand. Okay, I need to observe the ocean because the ocean does this and this and that. Then I, working on the ocean literacy aspect, can now complement while your observation is necessary. You know, the ocean literacy part, if challenge 9 and 10 is cross-cutting to all of the other activities. So I can be a subset or a segment of your program to address some of the fundamental in terms to get people to understand what the ocean is and is resources, its values, and what are the barriers and how do we overcome those barriers. I don't know if I'm making sense. Alison, can you chip in and see if I'm in order?
Yeah, no, I think you explained it very well. I mean, as you say, ocean literacy is fundamental and foundational to all of the challenges. So there will be specific programs such as the one you're proposing that will be focused on that. But we also want ocean literacy and these capacity development and other aspects to be an integral part of all the other programs, or many of the other programs and projects that will take place. So without having a sort of the tangible and concrete programs and projects, or at least the first set already in front of us, it does sound a little bit abstract, but I think, you know, what Anthony said, that sort of two scale or two level approach is very much in keeping with what we're aiming to do. And I should probably add that, you know, the implementation plan mentions ocean literacy, obviously in a number of places. It's a very important central theme, but there will be a separate ocean literacy strategy for the decade, which will be released in the next month or so, that will try to set out in more detail, I guess, how ocean literacy and why ocean literacy is such a fundamental part of the decade and some of the priority areas for action. And they align extremely well with the program that Anthony described. So I think that's something also to keep an eye out for in the next couple of months, that strategy, which will give more sort of concrete guidance on this question of ocean literacy.
Yeah, we have maybe 3 or 4 minutes left before we close the call. But one thing, and you mentioned this, Alison, also, I think Susan also, that the decade is not a funding mechanism, and yet obviously you cannot do very much if you don't have funding, especially at the global scale, at the scale of a whole continent. And this is something that we need to be very conscious about. And yet, what are the mechanisms that you're contemplating to provide funding or to help people to get funding to establish some of these actions?
So I can talk about two that we're already putting in place, and then there'll be others that are developed over in coming months. The first of these is we already have an informal working group of philanthropic foundations who are working in ocean science already, who are very keen in contributing to funding ocean science in a coordinated and a collective way, and finding ways that they can be working together around common priorities. So that's what the decade's all about, right? It's about presenting to groups such as that working group of foundations, here are the programs that are being proposed, here are the funding gaps, and here is how you could work together to actually fill those funding gaps. So it's a way of organizing and getting information to philanthropic foundations or others about where the main funding gaps are. And then we're also setting up the Ocean Decade Alliance, which will include foundations, but also private sector, development banks, governments. It's really a network of around 50 or so organizations, which will be major resource providers to the decade. And they will both provide resources directly themselves, but they'll also have an advocacy role to multiply and leverage funds from areas where people are not currently funding ocean science. And this could be private sector, which is completely dependent on ocean science, but is not yet funding ocean science, or philanthropies that are funding more development issues, but the development issues are so linked to ocean science that there could be synergies and ways again to bring them into the broader domain of ocean science. So both through the Ocean Decade Alliance, which we launched at an event in late January, as well as the working group that we have with the foundations, it's really about showing them where the gaps exist, showing them what the collective global priorities for ocean science are, and helping them create connections at their level to be able to leverage and multiply funds to support initiatives.
May I add something, Frank? Hello, Frank?
Yes, please.
Yeah, may I hear? Also to add to Alison, my advice as a scientist, if I wanted to get funding for my program, I will write, I will establish my program is interesting to, for example, ocean industry, for maritime, for some private sectors, and engage from the first private sectors and the ocean industry with your program. You can secure some funding. And also the funding of decade programs, maybe sometimes after that, I don't know what the process now, but something for least developed country or small island, maybe you can access some funding. But first, please think about private sectors and industry. And for example, if you can see my presentation, I am African. If I wanted to secure funding from private sectors, from ocean industry, I will write the program interesting with some item relevant to development, to blue economy, to maritime, to some that. Start first, and then after that you can make fundraising. That I already did for program will be published, endorsed this at January.
Great. Thank you very much. We are now at the end of the hour, and I really want to thank every one of you for your participation, your advice, your engagement, and the actions that you're proposing for the decade. This is really great, and I hope that we can continue that conversation. We're already past the hour. I don't know, Brian, if you have any closing words.
Oh, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining. I thought it was a wonderful discussion. And thank you, Frank, for organizing this panel.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting. Again, Happy New Year to everybody. And I hope to see
Happy
you all
New
many,
Year.
many times and doing things together.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
everybody for
Bye-bye.
participating.
Bye.
I look forward to working with all of you.
Bye.